I grew up in the north of England, but my adopted home is Kent, where I've lived and baked for many years. It's a county rich in orchards, soft fruit, hops, and this little fella, the Kentish Cobnut.
Which happens to be the star in my next recipe, a Cobnut pear and sticky toffee tart. The little-known Cobnut is actually a cultivated hazelnut which grows in orchards, or plats as they're known. In Kent, they're a much-loved part of the local food heritage.
We bought this property about 21 years ago and inherited the ancient nut plat with it. And this nut plat is about 2.5 acres. And we think there's only about 200, 250 acres of cobnuts left in the UK. So in proportion, it's quite a considerable sized nut plat. The cobnut is very definitely a Kentish harvest. Kent was also very well known for picking hops, and the harvest workers would pick the hops, pick the apples, and then move into the cobnuts. The flavour of the cobnut is distinctively nutty. It's a little bit sweet, and it's a very soft, gentle nut. It lends itself very well to being added with other ingredients, and in fact it works well with most of the crops that we associate with the garden of England.
Cobnuts are usually eaten fresh, rather than dried like most nuts, and are in season from mid-August to mid-October. They're rich in vitamin E and calcium and go great with other ingredients, which is good news because I want to add their nutty flavour to my Cobnut, pear and sticky toffee tart.
Our cobnuts are quite hard to cultivate. As you can see, the rows are very tightly planted, so we generally can't get a tractor between them. That means we can't mow the grass to keep the vegetation down, so we have to have the sheep in to help keep everything to a low level. They're great food to eat, just sitting down communally, cracking them open after dinner and eating them. And of course what's fantastic is that they're local.
So that's how cobnuts are grown in Kent. Now, I want to find out how the locals eat them. Emma Jane Eames lives down the road. She spent 4 years in Italy, and on her return, she decided to use cobnuts in some of the dishes she's been making overseas.
I've been working with cobnuts about 8 months or so. I first came across them when I moved home from Italy and wanted to find a substitute for the traditional pine nuts to use in a pesto.
Emma's revolutionised an Italian classic with cobnuts. She uses them to make a pesto.
I think with pine nuts in pesto, it's not as creamy as with cobnuts. They're extremely buttery, so add a real depth of flavour, rather than pine nuts can get lost into the background.
Emma's pesto recipe is garlic, basil, those all-important cobnuts, some local cheese, and a dash of olive oil.
The nice hot bread will absorb all the garlic and the basil. And there you have some simple mushroom and pesto bruschetta.
From kitchen savoury to wholesale chocolates, the humble cobnut is an extremely versatile ingredient. Debbie Carter runs a business making chocolates, which she sells to a wide range of customers, from farmers markets to five-star hotels.
Well, I love the flavour of nuts and chocolate together. Just think it's a fabulous combination. And because I do believe in using good quality local products where I can, Cobnuts fits the bill.
Debbie's range of chocolates runs from dipped cobnuts to her favourite recipe, a praline. It's a hot mixture of glucose and cream poured over chocolate drops.
And the heat from that will just melt the chocolate.
Then she adds the chopped cobnuts. And once they're set, they're ready.
There we go.
So I've seen what the people of Kent do with their cobnuts, and I'm joined in the kitchen by Rachel and Debbie. I've heard of cobnuts so long, until recently I've never had them, and I'm quite annoyed with myself now because I've never actually tried them.
Well, if you've been in Kent 15 years, you should have tried them before.
I've heard of them, but I never thought, oh yeah, it's just one of those things, you know. In its raw form, it looks pretty ugly, doesn't it?
Oh no, it looks beautiful.
Do you think so? You've been around too long.
No, it looks lovely.
It's different to any nut that you've tried before. It's got the texture of a Brazil nut. It seems to have that depth of flavour and a slightly more chewiness than you get with a hazelnut or a peanut. But then it's got a lot of nutty flavour and a little hint of spice that sort of sits at the top, almost peppery.
Okay.
So is it very seasonal then? What sort of timescale are you looking at?
We start picking mid to the end of August when we pick the green nut, and then pick through till early October when the nuts start to fall on the ground.
You used cobnut in chocolate.
Yes.
How does that differ to sort of hazelnuts, for instance?
Well, you just said yourself that you prefer the taste of the cobnut, and I think a lot of people do when they try them side by side. The flavour is better. So why buy hazelnuts when I can get cobnuts locally?
I love the idea that they're in chocolate, and I love the idea that it's Kentish cobnuts. Can I just have a look at one of those in there? Do you mind if I try a little bit?
No, do, go ahead.
I like chocolate.
Do you?
Yeah, I do. Do they sell well?
Yes, the Cobnut bar is one of the most popular bars that I sell.
That's gorgeous. I mean, really nice. That's dangerous to me, that. Right, I'm going to make something a little bit different. What I'm going to do, I'm going to use pears, I'm going to use dates, and I'm going to use the cobnuts. I'm going to turn it into a tart. So it's quite rich. It's got a toffee in there as well, so there's a lot of elements going on in this.
First, heat some dates and milk in a pan until the dates go soft.
You end up with something like this. You then get a masher in there and give it a good bit of bashing, just to really soften down those dates and break them down a bit. So there you have it. That's your basic mix, which goes in here.
So it's a bit like when you do sticky toffee pudding.
Yeah, it is, absolutely. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is knock up a quick toffee sauce.
In a separate pan, heat some soft brown sugar and butter.
And then what you need to do is soften that down, and it will melt fairly quickly. We'll leave that alone for a minute.
Add butter to the softened dates and mix.
This is going to be the melee that's going to be the basis for the whole dish.
Keep an eye on your pan of butter and brown sugar.
Now, this is beginning to melt. Oh, it smells lovely. Now I'm going to add the cream to that.
Once the sugar is melted, take the pan off the heat and allow the sugar to dissolve.
And that's your basic toffee sauce. You can still feel a few grains down at the bottom. Mum, have I still got any cream on my face?
Yes.
Yeah, you have actually.
I have. You're going to play Mum for me? Where is it?
I won't lick it. How about that?
OK, there we have it.
Smells fantastic.
It's so easy to do. I mean, it's melted down now. I can't feel any sugar in that at all. I'm going to leave that to one side. Going back to the mix.
Fold in 2 eggs, add ground almonds and plain flour.
You can see this mixture coming together.
Add brown sugar and black treacle.
You can see the colour instantly. It's going to be quite dark pudding, this. Look at the colour of that. It's fantastic.
You can really smell the treacle, actually. It's really inviting.
You can. Vanilla, a little bit of flavour. Bicarb gives it a little bit of kick in there as well, and it'll grow a little bit around what the pears are going to do inside the tart. So again, that's the basis of the tart.
Line a tart shell with short crust pastry.
Because we're filling this, we don't need to blind bake it.
Then slice some ripe pears and put them in the tin.
This will add a gorgeous flavour, and you know you're going to get one in every bite. It doesn't really matter how it's laid out because you're going to cover this then in sauce.
Now it's time for those all-important cobnuts.
And why have I not tried these before? I'm annoyed with myself, actually.
Add them to the date mix, then pour the toffee sauce over the base before adding the rest of the filling.
Look at that. Can't wait for you to try it and tell me what you think.
Can't wait either.
Cover with more cobnuts and it's ready for cooking.
Now, this is going to go into the oven at 180 for 40 to 45 minutes, and it will set, and you'll see visibly it'll just draw back slightly from the pastry. I'm going to pop that straight in. And over here, you can see the baking powder has risen up all the way along, and this is what you call a proper pudding. I think I'll just take a little slice out of it so you can see it. It's beautiful and soft. And inside, you have that gorgeous pear, heightened by the flavour of the Cobnuts. So you have Cobnut, pear, and sticky toffee tart.
Packed with fruity flavour and chocolate nuttiness, this pudding is delicious on its own or with a drop of fresh cream.
You're gonna have to wait a little bit longer before you get a chance to try it.